Welcome to Key Tech. Please describe this channel if you are interested in today's video. In the fall of 2019, when TSMC was ready to attack Huawei, the Pandora's box of the chip industry was opened, and everything changed. For a time, Huawei fell into the darkest moment. Its mobile phone business was severely reduced, and it could only extend the life cycle of mobile phones indefinitely through limited chip inventory. At that time, many people, companies, and experts spoke up for Huawei. Qualcomm, Intel, and AMD lobbied the White House in the hope of obtaining the right to supply Huawei. Microsoft founder Bill Gates even warned that the supply of chips to Chinese companies would force China to accelerate its self-sufficiency, and the United States would lose a large number of high-paying jobs. Huawei even warned that once the ban was implemented, no company in the chip industry chain would be able to stay out of it. In December last year, TSMC and Samsung announced the suspension of 7nm process AI chips. Just 1 month later, the media reported that Biden planned to launch more plans in the last days of his administration to prevent advanced chips from TSMC, Samsung, and other chip factories from flowing to mainland China. According to the draft, chips of 14nm or 16nm and below will be subject to control measures and require a license before they can be shipped to mainland users. In short, not only 7nm, but even 14nm processed chips will be locked. In the entire chip market, 14nm is a watershed in chip manufacturing technology. The chips of this process not only have strong performance, but also excellent power consumption performance, and the key cost performance is also very high, which can almost meet the needs of mobile phones, PCs, smart cars, home appliances, and other fields. The United States has cut off supply from 7nm to 14nm, and its purpose is very clear, which is to comprehensively hinder China's breakthroughs in various fields, even if it has released a sense of malice at the last minute. Huawei and other chip factories are collectively silent. However, after this news appeared, a strange phenomenon appeared. Not only Huawei and other domestic chip factories were collectively silent, but overseas chip factories also chose to remain silent. Why does this phenomenon occur? First of all, from cutting off the supply of Huawei's 5nm chips, Google GMS, chip instruction set authorization, to EDA authorization, to last year's 7nm AI chips, and now to 14nm processed chips, the West has frequently increased its stakes in the chip field, like cutting sausages and constantly exerting pressure. A series of operations have not only made China recognize the reality, but also made China realize that it is almost impossible to change this situation. Instead of wasting energy to speak out and resist, it is better to remain silent, work hard, and seek more pragmatic breakthroughs. Secondly, China's chip capabilities are no longer the same as they were 5 years ago. From the moment TSMC gave up its neutrality, China's chip industry has been reporting good news, not only achieving mass production of 90 nanometers lithography machines, but also mass production of 14 nanometers processed chips. The exposure of a 5 nanometers processed chip mining card and the return of Kirin 9020 and other chips also confirm that China's chip technology is no longer limited to 14 nanometers. The key is that Kirin chips can be mass-produced in China, which is enough to prove that domestic companies have opened up the supply chain of mid to high-end chips such as 14 nanometers. Whether it is etching machines, lithography machines, or materials such as lithography machines, they have all achieved independent assets and self-reliance. China's chip exports of over 1 trillion yuan in 2024 have further confirmed that China has not only made a breakthrough in technology, but also achieved a significant increase in production capacity. Overseas chip factories are speechless. It is worth noting that in addition to domestic chip factories, overseas chips are also silent, and it is better to say that they are speechless than to call them silent. Data shows that China's chip imports in 2024 will still be as high as $395 billion, totaling about 2.9 trillion yuan, most of which are mature process chips such as 14 nanometers. At present, China is in the process of mass production of 14 nanometers processed chips, but the West intends to prevent overseas chip factories from providing 14 nanometers chips to Chinese companies. This operation will undoubtedly make more and more orders return to the mainland market. Overseas chip companies can only stare and watch the orders disappear. The baby is in pain. In general, the U.S. restriction on China's 14 nanometers chips is a double-edged sword. In the short term, it may affect the industrial chain layout of some chip companies, but in the long run, this move will undoubtedly accelerate China's development in the field of mid to high-end chips. In short, the U.S. restriction on China's 14 nanometers chip supply has caused Huawei and other domestic and foreign chip manufacturers to respond silently. China's chip industry has made significant breakthroughs. The U.S. move may accelerate the development of China's mid to high-end chips, while causing the loss of orders from overseas chip companies.